Hello everyone and welcome to the first official devlog of Spire. Today I want to talk a little bit about choosing the right game engine for your project and some of the basic design choices that we made with Spire. When I first started working with Spire, I was faced with a difficult decision of which game engine to use. I've used multiple game engines, from JavaScript game engines to Unity to Unreal to Godot, and it's a difficult decision of which game engine to use because after doing a lot of research and after doing a lot of testing and working out different options, I ultimately chose Godot over Unity, and in this video I'm going to explain why I chose those and why it's such a hard and difficult decision to make. First off, let's talk a little bit about why choosing the right game engine is so important. Because your game engine is the backbone of your project, and it will determine the tools and resources available to you during development. And choosing the wrong engine can lead to a lot of wasted time and frustration. So it's important to do your research and choose wisely. Trust me, I have learned this the hard way. When it came to choosing between Godot and Unity, I ultimately went with Godot for a few key reasons. Firstly, Godot is a completely free open source engine, which means that you can see everything that's happening behind the scenes. And another factor that led me to choose Godot was its focus on 2D game development, especially during Godot 3. While a couple weeks back Godot 4 came out and they have an immense amount of new features for both 2D and 3D game development. But back when we started making Spire, Godot 3 was the only long-term support version to use. But even though looking back, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. While Unity is definitely more than capable of handling 2D games, I found that the tools and resources of Godot 3 were more geared towards 2D game development, which made it a lot easier for me and us to work with. And I was also drawn to the Godot scripting language, which is GDScript. While it may not be as widely used as Unity's C# language, I found that it was really easy to learn and it had a lot of built-in functionality that made the development a lot faster and a lot more efficient. After the tough choice of a game engine, it's time to branch out to the basics of our game, and one of which is the perspective that we wanted to use. When it comes down to game perspectives, there are a lot of options to choose from. You've got first person, third person, top down, isometric, just to name a few. But for Spire, I ultimately decided to go with an isometric perspective, because I felt that was the best fit for a game's tactical turn-based gameplay. With an isometric perspective, you get a bird's eye view of the action, which allows for better strategic planning and positioning of your characters. But why did I choose to work with 2D graphics rather than 3D graphics? Well, there are certainly advantages to working in 3D, such as realistic graphics and the ability to create more immersive environments. However, for Spire, I felt that 2D graphics were the best choice for a few reasons. Firstly, 2D graphics are often easier to use. They're especially for a smaller team of developers, smaller team of artists. With 2D graphics, you don't have to worry about complex 3D models or animations, which can save us a lot of time and resources. But additionally, 2D graphics can often look just as good as 3D graphics, especially with the use of advanced techniques we have nowadays, such as shaders and particles and specific lighting. Another advantage of working with 2D graphics is that they can often be more versatile than 3D graphics. It's easier to create different variations of the same character or the same asset, simply by changing the colors or textures without having to worry about the entirety of the model. And this can especially be useful for a game like Spire, which features a lot of different characters and environments. Now that we've chosen a perspective, what's there to look out for when making a 2D isometric TRPG like Spire? When making a 2D tactical RPG, it's important to make sure that the gameplay is both engaging and challenging. The turn-based combat in games like this is a major component of the game, and it's important to make sure that it's balanced and fair for the player. Additionally, the game's story and characters should be compelling and interesting, as that's what will keep players invested in the game's world. Another thing to look out for is the game's UI and controls, and with an isometric perspective, it's especially important to make sure that the game's UI is very clear and easy to understand, so that all the players can easily navigate the game's menus and options, but also navigate their characters, navigate the AI, and see exactly what's going on, so that players can quickly and easily execute their actions during the combat. Very important to pay attention to the game's art and sound design. The game's environments and characters should be visually appealing and well designed, so that players will feel immersed in the game's world, because it's a lot harder to create an immersive world in 2D than it is in 3D. Similarly, the game's sound effects and music should be well crafted and add to the overall experience of the game. One of the unique design choices that we made with Spire is that we decided to use Dungeons & Dragons-like tokens as characters instead of animated characters. There are a few reasons why we chose to use tokens for characters. Tokens are easier to create and modify than fully animated models. We have already talked about this before, but this allows us to quickly and efficiently create new characters and assets as needed, without having to worry about complexities of the animation. Additionally, using tokens allows for greater customization and personalization of our characters. With tokens, players can easily customize their characters with different equipment and accessories, which can give them a sense of ownership and investment in the game's world. However, using tokens instead of animated characters can also present some challenges, and we've had quite a few. Namely, it can be difficult to make the game feel alive and dynamic without the use of animations. To combat this, we focused on making the game's environments and sound design as immersive as possible. By creating detailed and interesting environments and using sound effects and music to enhance the game's atmosphere, we were able to create a sense of immersion and engagement for players, even without the use of complex animations. Apart from the art and sound design, you also need to make specific choices about the game's mechanics, and this is where it took us the most amount of time. This is where we chose one of Spire's most important gameplay aspects, that are team turns. It's not unique, but it's a very important decision to make, because when it comes to tactical RPGs, there are a lot of different ways to handle turn-based combat. Some games use character turns, where each individual character takes their turn. However, for Spire, we decided to go with team turns, where players' entire team acts as a single unit. There are a few reasons why we chose to go with team turns for Spire. Team turns make combat more strategic, as players need to consider the actions of the entire team when planning their moves. This allows for greater variety of tactical options, as players can work together to set up combos and take advantage of each other's strengths. Additionally, team turns make combat a lot faster and more fluid. In games that use character turns, combat can often become bogged down as players wait for individual characters to take their turn. But with team turns, combat moves more quickly, which keeps players more engaged and invested in the actual action. And team turns make it easier to balance the game's difficulty. With character turns, it can be difficult to balance combat encounters, because some characters may be more powerful than others. With team turns, all of the characters act together as a single unit, which allows for more precise balancing of the combat encounters. Our characters move in a chess-like manner. When it comes to tactical RPGs, movement is a critical component of the game's mechanics. However, instead of using free-form movement like in some games, Spire uses a chess-like movement system where characters can move a certain number of spaces in specific directions. There are a few reasons why we chose to use chess-like movement systems for Spire. It simplifies movement mechanics. making it easier for players to understand and strategize around. Additionally, it allows us to create more complex and interesting level designs, as we can design specific levels around specific movement patterns and limitations. However, using a chess-like movement system can also present a couple issues or a couple challenges. For example, it can be difficult to create realistic and believable movement animations for characters, since they're only moving in a limited amount of directions, which is where our tokens really come into play. Because the combination between the art and the movement choices that we made actually makes sense. So this was it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's devlog. We'll see you next time. Next time we'll talk more about combining different genres into one specific game, why we did that and how we did that.